So thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And I'm so happy to be here at your beautiful campus. It's so fun to be in California. It's so fun to be at CGU. So thanks so much for having me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes about this personality framework that I've developed. And then we're going to have time for questions, which is always my favorite part. So please be thinking of your questions. It's so fun for me to get out in the world after being behind my laptop for so long and get to meet readers of my books, listeners of the Happier podcast, people who follow me on Instagram. So it's great to be able to talk to people face to face. But first, I want to throw out a few questions for you. Raise your hand if you've ever been told by people that you're too rigid and you need to learn to loosen up and be more spontaneous. Okay, my hand is up. Raise your hand if people have ever told you that you ask too many questions. Raise your hand if you've ever thought to yourself, oh, commitments to other people can't be broken, but commitments to myself, those can be broken. Okay? And raise your hand if someone's ever complained, you never do anything I ask you to do. Okay, so these set the scene for what we're going to talk about, the four tendencies. They say there are two kinds of people in the world, the kind of people who like to divide the world into two kinds of people, and the kind of people who don't. And I'm the kind of people who does. And I got the first insight into what turned into the Four Tendencies framework in a very inconspicuous moment. I was having lunch with a friend, and because, as my sister Elizabeth often tells me, I can be a little bit of a happiness bully, I was grilling her about her happiness and her habits. And my friend said something to me that hit me like a lightning bolt, even though I'd heard people say similar things many times. She said, the weird thing about me is I know I would be happier if I exercised. And when I was in high school, I was on the track team, and I never missed track practice. So why can't I go running now? And I thought, well, why? It's the same person, the same behavior. At one time it was effortless, now she can't do it. What is going on? And then I started to notice other kinds of patterns. Like, when I would talk to people about New Year's resolutions, a certain number of people would answer in uncannily exactly the same way. They would say, well, I would keep a resolution whenever it made sense for me, but I wouldn't do it on January 1st, because January 1st is an arbitrary date. And that caught my attention because I thought, well, you know, the arbitrariness of January 1st never really bothered me. And then, you know, and I was thinking a lot about habits, and to me, the idea of a life full of habits felt energizing and freeing and exciting. But clearly, some people were absolutely repelled by the idea of a life full of habits, and they would ask me, like, why in the world would you study such like a repugnant subject? And I thought, well, this was weird, because they really think about habits in a very different way from me. But I didn't understand how these patterns fit together, or even that they were related to each other, until I happened to look down one day on my desk, and I saw my messy to-do list, you know, half of the things crossed off, and all of a sudden it hit me, like the word leaped out, expectation. And I realized that what was going on, it had to do with expectations, how we respond to expectations. And the minute I identified expectations, I saw there are two kinds of expectations that we all face. We all face outer expectations, like a work deadline, a professor's deadline, a request from a friend. And we all face inner expectations, our own desire to keep a New Year's resolution, our own desire to get back into practicing guitar. And I realized that depending on how we respond to outer and inner expectations, we fall into one of four categories: upholder, questioner, obliger, and rebel. And I know this expectation sounds really, really boring, but I promise it is juicy. Stay with me. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through these, and then I'm going to go back through them and ask you to raise your hand for your tendency, because it's always really interesting to see who's in the room. Then I'm going to answer some frequently asked questions about the four tendencies and talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of the tendencies. And I'm going to focus on the weaknesses and the limitations of the tendencies, because that's where we have the most opportunity for change. And then we'll have time for your questions. So here we go: upholder, questioner, obliger, rebel. And I sometimes get the feeling that people are trying to figure out the best tendency and like slot themselves into it. I assure you, all of these have strengths and weaknesses. All these tendencies include people who are big, big successes and also big, big losers. So be honest. Upholders readily meet outer and inner expectations. They meet the work deadline, they keep the New Year's resolution without much fuss. They want to know what other people expect from them, but their expectations for themselves are just as important. Next, questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do it if they think it makes sense. So they make everything an inner expectation. If it meets their standard, they will do it no problem. If it fails their standard, they will resist. They tend to hate anything arbitrary, inefficient, unjustified. Next, obligers. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. So this explains the mystery of my friend on the track team. When she had a team and a coach expecting her, she had no trouble showing up. When she was just trying to go running on her own, she struggled. Then, rebels. Rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. If you ask or tell them to do something, they're very likely to resist. Typically, they don't even like to tell themselves what to do. Okay. So raise your hand if you're an upholder. An upholder readily meets outer and inner expectations. My hand is up. That's my tendency. Okay? Next, questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do something if they think it makes sense. Okay? Next, obligers. Obligers readily meet outer. They struggle to meet inner. Okay? Next, rebels. Rebels readily resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. Well, you are a very rebel because you're sitting in the middle. Usually rebels sit in the front or the back for reasons that I've never really quite figured out. Oh, that's rebel. Okay. But if you were saying to yourself, I really question the validity of this framework, you're probably a questioner. So what we saw in the room is very typical of what I see generally. Generally, for both men and women everywhere, obliger is the biggest tendency. That is the one that the largest number of people fit into. You either are an obliger or you have many obligers in your life. It's a big tendency. Right behind them, questioners, also a very big tendency. And what we saw here, rebel is a very small tendency. It's a conspicuous tendency, but it's a small tendency. But what came as a shock to me when I developed this framework, my tendency, the upholder tendency, is only slightly larger. And I remember going to my husband and being like, oh my gosh, I just figured out I'm part of this like freaky, extreme, fringe personality type. And he was like, you think? Yeah. He was not surprised. Those are the two poles, upholder and rebel. They're small. Most people are upholders, are questioners or obligers, and that has a lot of implications if you're managing large teams, if you're designing a device or a program. You want to think about the fact that probably most of the people are going to be obligers or questioners. So now I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about some of the strengths and weaknesses. For you, if you're managing yourself, because this is your tendency, or if you have people in your life, whether at home or at work or in life, wherever, where you're trying to deal successfully with them. So upholder. And each of the tendencies has mottos, and that was my favorite part of writing the book, was collecting the mottos. I have thousands of them. I will only tell you the very best motto for each one today. So the motto of upholder is, discipline is my freedom. That is the motto of upholder. So in many ways, it's great to be an upholder, great to be around upholders. They're self-starters, they're independent, they don't need a lot of accountability. They're very good at executing both outer and inner expectations. But the strength, like for all the tendencies, the strengths are also the weaknesses. So the weaknesses that come with those strengths is sometimes upholders are not good at being flexible. It's not easy for them when plans change suddenly. It's hard for them when it's not clear what expectations are or where situations are ambiguous. They can become very uneasy. They're not good at like situations that are fluid. Upholders can sometimes experience tightening. Tightening is when the rules get tighter on upholders. For a lot of people, as things go along, the rules kind of loosen up. For upholders, they often get tighter. So I'm one of these crazy low-carb people that you read about, like I really eat very low carb. And when I started, I was pretty low carb. But over time, the rules have become tighter. Now, that's okay with me in this context because I think that's a healthy way to eat. But sometimes for upholders, they can become kind of like the mindless bureaucrat of their own paperwork, and the tightening can become very choking. So upholders and people around upholders need to be mindful that this is something that can happen. You don't want to like overemphasize how much someone needs to do like their physical rehabilitation exercises if you're dealing with an upholder, because instead of doing them twice a day, they might end up doing them 4 times a day. You want to be very clear about something like that. And the fact is, upholders can sometimes seem kind of judgmental and cold. because things come pretty easily to upholders that others struggle with, and sometimes upholders don't have much empathy for that. They don't understand why others are struggling. And they can seem kind of cold, because it's like you come to me and you say, oh my gosh, the reports are due tomorrow. Can you take some time and proofread my report? And I say, yeah, I'm sorry, my report's due tomorrow too. I can't help you out. I got to do my own work. That can seem kind of cold. Or, oh yeah, we've got family coming into town this week, but I got to train for the marathon, so I'm going on a 12-mile run tomorrow. Sorry, I got to keep my inner expectation. So that's upholders. Questioners. Now, questioners are great for all of us to have around because they're the ones that keep everybody on track to not waste time, not waste energy. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this by Friday? Why am I listening to you? They have this drive towards everything making sense, and that's very positive. But they can sometimes drain and overwhelm others with their questioning. And to other people, it's like, oh my gosh, we've been talking about this report for 45 minutes. Why do you keep wanting to know more and more? Let's move on. And that can be difficult for people to manage, and it can cause a lot of friction and resentment. And even for questioners themselves, it can lead to something, analysis paralysis, which is where questioners want perfect information before they move forward or make a decision. But a lot of times in this world, we have to move forward without perfect information. And yet they just want to research, and they're not moving forward. So what can you do if you're a questioner or you're dealing with a questioner? You can use deadlines. We need an answer by Friday. After Friday, it's less efficient. That's when we need the answer. I need your best guess by Friday. We can set limits. I want you to interview 5 candidates, but not 25 candidates. You can go to 5 camping stores, but you cannot go to 20 camping stores to pick out the perfect tent. Or you can use trusted authority. Okay, I trust Consumer Reports, or oh, we know this team has used this software before. We know this team, they do good work, they do their research. We're not gonna just slavishly follow what they do, but we can be guided by their judgment and their experience. We don't have to start from scratch. And the other thing that comes up with questioners, you see this in questioner children, questioner adults, is that their questioning is sometimes seen as others as not constructive. They can be seen as insubordinate, disrespectful. So if you have a teacher and a questioner child, and the questioner child is like, well, why do I have to learn cursive if I'm going to just be typing on a laptop? Why do I have to memorize the multiplication tables when I can just check my phone? Why do I have to learn about ancient Mesopotamia when I'm never going to use that before? And the teacher says, because I say so, because that's what 6th graders do, because I'm the teacher. That's not acceptable to a questioner. Questioners have to have robust justifications, or they're not going to get with the program. So that child can be seen as disrespectful or obstructionist. At work, a questioner who has a thin-skinned boss might be seen as insubordinate or undermining of the boss's authority. Some workplaces really value and reward questioner behavior. Other workplaces really do not. And a lot of questioners have talked to me about figuring out that they need to move to a different environment because people did not appreciate their questioner perspective. And of course, part of the skill of a questioner is learning to ask questions in a way that seems constructive to others and doesn't set them on edge. Then obligers. Okay, you either are an obliger or there are many obligers in your life because it's a big tendency. So we all have to think very carefully about the obligers. I forgot the questioner motto. It's one of my favorite mottos because it's a rhyming motto. I'll comply if you convince me why. And the motto for obligers is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. So obligers are the rock of the world. They are great team members. They're great leaders. They can be very visionary leaders. They're great family members. They're great people to have around. They're type O, obliger, because they're the ones that most universally hook up with the other tendencies. They work the most easily with the other tendencies. And the frustrations of the obliger tendency really fall most heavily on obligers themselves because they're frustrated by the fact that they're meeting other people's expectations, but they're struggling to meet their own expectations. So if this is a situation, either for you or for someone close to you, this is the answer. This is the solution. There's a very, very easy fix. Outer accountability. If an obliger wants to meet an inner expectation, there must be a structure of outer accountability around that expectation. If you want to read more, join a book group. What would I say now to my friend who is having trouble exercising? Now that I've invented the Four Tendencies framework, I have her answer. Take a class where the instructor is going to take attendance. Work with a trainer who's going to know if you don't show up. Run with your dog who's going to be so disappointed if he doesn't get to go for his daily run, which is the highlight of his day. Think of your duty to be a role model for your children or other members of your family. You're going to model healthy behavior. You're going to show how somebody can keep commitments to themselves. You're going to volunteer to run a charity 5K, and they're not going to make as much money if you don't follow through with doing that run. There's a million ways to create outer accountability once you realize that that is what is needed. That is what is needed. It's easy to create outer accountability. Just plug it in. And one of my favorite things is all the hilarious, imaginative ways that obligers have created outer accountability for themselves. My favorite is a woman who wanted to get up early. She was totally immune to snooze alarms, had no dog, and lived by herself. Interesting challenge. How do you give yourself outer accountability? She used the social media management platform Hootsuite to create an embarrassing Facebook post. And she set it to post every morning unless she got up to disable it. That's smart. Two guys would go to the gym at the same time every day, and as they left, they would trade a shoe. So if you don't come, I can't work out because you've got my shoe. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but you have to recognize that you need it. Here is another pattern that is very important to understand about obligers, for yourself and for others, and that is Obliger Rebellion. There's a very striking pattern among obligers where they will meet expectations, then suddenly they snap. And they're like, this I will not do. And sometimes it can be small and kind of symbolic, like, I think I'm just not going to answer your emails for a couple weeks. Sometimes it can be huge and destructive. Somebody just emailed me yesterday saying that she ended a 20-year friendship with somebody and hasn't spoken to her since because this friend was very, very needy and demanding, and then at a certain point she just snapped, and it was like, you're dead to me. The thing about Obliger Rebellion is that it feels like an explosion. The metaphors that obligers use is it's a balloon bursting, it's a volcano erupting, it's the lid blowing off a pot. It is not a controlled burn, it's not a slow resistance, it's an explosion. Now, it took me a long time to understand this, Obliger Rebellion is meant to help obligers. Because Obliger Rebellion sets in when obligers feel taken advantage of, exploited, ignored, where expectations are unreasonably heavy. And so it's meant to blow up a situation to allow the obliger to escape into relief. So it's meant to be helpful, but it can often be destructive. And the people around obligers often are very puzzled by this. They don't understand it. Well, if you didn't want to do it, why didn't you say you were going to do it? Why didn't you tell me this was a problem? Why are you only telling me this now? Or your best employee is walking out the door and there's no ability to fix things. And so it's very important for obligers to be aware when they're starting to get this feeling of deep burnout and resentment that is sliding them towards Obliger Rebellion, so they can try to mindfully intervene in it. Or we, as the people around obligers, want to watch out for situations that might trip up into Obliger Rebellion. Look, it's easy. Okay, there's a lot of unpleasant work travel. Is it being equally distributed among the team? Is there one or two people who are picking up way more extra shifts than everybody else? Is that fair? Why is that? Obligers feel like they're taken advantage of, and they are. Absolutely, Upholders, questioners, and rebels take advantage of obligers. Absolutely. So it's important to recognize that and try to keep things fair. A friend of mine who started a finance company had a guy who worked for him who was an obliger who was outstanding. And so as a consequence, everybody wanted to pull him onto their teams because he was just a real asset. And so when this guy came in, his boss, who was my friend, looked at everything he was doing and said, you're doing too much work too well. And I mean that as a sincere criticism because it wasn't sustainable. And so he took that guy off a couple of those teams, not as a punishment, but out of recognition that it wasn't sustainable. And so you don't want that valuable employee to burn out, feel resentment, explode, and walk out the door to a competitor. So it's like, figure it out. Say, oh, I see you haven't taken a vacation in 18 months. I need you to come in by Friday and tell me when you're going to take in a week in the Poconos or whatever the California equivalent is of the Poconos. You need to take a vacation. I'm going to hold you accountable to taking that vacation because I don't want you to slide into Obligor Rebellion. Finally, rebels. Rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. This is a tremendous source of power for them. They're very authentic. They know what they want. They can do anything they want. They can do anything they choose to do. But it can be difficult to be around somebody who, if you ask or tell them to do something, is very likely to resist. Their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. So how do you deal with a rebel, either as a rebel yourself or as a rebel in your life? If you can't ask or tell somebody to do something without making them want to resist, how do you work with them? So there's two sort of main avenues for thinking about dealing with rebels. And I have to say, rebel is the smallest tendency, but it's the largest chapter in the book because it's the one that is like kind of the hardest to wrap your mind around if you're not a rebel yourself. So the first thing is identity. Rebels always want to project their identity into the world. They want to be true to their authentic self. So whenever you remind them, this is the person you want to be, this is the person you are, that is a powerful inspiration to them. And they can often do things that they wouldn't otherwise want to do because it reflects their identity. So typically, rebels don't like to do repetitive, dull tasks. They don't like to be told to show up at the same place at the same time. But if you remind them, look, you're a loving, responsible, reliable parent. You can show up to carpool on time because that's who you are, or like you're a strong, athletic, energetic person. You've always been that way. And so therefore, certain behaviors follow from that, which you can do because that's the kind of person you are. That's the kind of person you want to be. The other thing that can work is the sequence of information, consequences, choice. You give the rebel the information they need, you tell them the consequences of their action or their inaction, and then you let them choose. So you might say to a rebel child, if you go outside on a bright sunny day, you can get a sunburn. A bad sunburn really hurts, your skin can even blister and peel. And you're stuck inside when all your friends are outside playing because you're stuck indoors until your sunburn goes away. Do you feel like wearing a baseball cap and a long sleeve t-shirt, or do you feel like wearing sunscreen lotion? Information, consequences, choice. But here's the trick. This is easier said than done because if this is going to work, you must allow negative consequences to fall on that rebel. You cannot insulate them. You cannot protect them. You cannot ride in at 2 a.m. the night before and help them finish the assignment so that they get it in on time. No, you have to let negative consequences fall. And that can be painful to witness. And often, if you're paired up with a rebel, those negative consequences can fall on you too. That's hard, but that has to be what happens. And here's the other tricky thing. You can't remind. You can't suggest. Because the more you suggest or remind, the more you incite that spirit of resistance. So, as mentioned, I had this podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin, which I do with my sister, an Obliger, by the way. And she and I, so we got, just sort of by chance, we had two women write in the same week, and they both had the same problem. They had rebel sweethearts who were not looking for work. In one case, the guy had been laid off, and in the other case, the guy was moving from one city to another to be with this woman. And their question was, I know that my sweetheart is a rebel, and I want to know what is it that I can do to help him look for work, because he's not, and he needs to. So my response to this, my suggestion was so radical that I actually met with a rebel friend of mine to say, like, does this sound like the right thing to say to you? And she was like, 100%, that's the right answer. What's the right answer? Don't do anything. Don't do anything. Don't make a list of helpful phone numbers. Don't make an Excel spreadsheet. Don't make a timeline and post it on the fridge in a helpful way. Do nothing. These guys know they need a job. Every time you remind them, you're igniting the spirit of resistance. This is hard to do. It is hard to do nothing. But I don't even know, I should keep count because it's hilarious how many rebel teenagers have specifically told me the example of the making the bed. I don't know why this must be like an archetypal experience in the life of a rebel child. There I was making my bed, and I hear my parents' voice calling up the stairs, "Don't forget to make your bed." And then I throw the covers back to the back. They are going to do it because they want to do it. They're going to do it because they choose to do it. They may do it out of love for you. But they're not going to do it because they said they do it. They're not going to do it because they're supposed to do it. They're not going to do it because it's doctor's orders. They're going to do it in their own way, in their own time. So you got to let that happen. So, and here's an interesting thing about rebels. If a rebel is paired up, either in work or like a founding team, or in life, like a married couple, almost always the rebel is paired with an obliger. That is the most stable pattern. Now, there are exceptions to that, but almost always when you see a rebel, the rebel is paired with an obliger. So that's just something to keep in mind. So here's just some frequently asked questions about the four tendencies, and then we're gonna have your questions. So one is, I do think that these are inborn. I think that these are just hardwired parts of your nature. You're not one at 20 and one at 40. You're not one at work and one at home. But these are very narrow aspects of your personality. So we could have 50 obligers lined up here, and they would look completely different from each other, depending on how ambitious they were, how intellectual they were, how curious they were, how considerate of other people's feelings they were, how much they cared about fitting in, how extroverted or introverted they were, how controlling they were, how neurotic they were. All these things would make them very different from each other. But as to one thing, how do they respond to expectations? In that way, they would be alike. So this is just one very narrow thing. Now, I do believe everybody fits within one core tendency. But if you think, and if you look in the book, you'll see a graph right on the inside. In the inside, you see how the four tendencies interlap with each other. And so you could be a questioner, and in some ways, a questioner is like an upholder because they both readily meet inner expectations. And in some ways, a questioner is like a rebel in that they both resist outer expectations. So whether you're a questioner, so like my husband is a questioner who tips to upholder, Steve Jobs was a questioner who tipped to rebel. So this can kind of color the expression of your tendency, which way you tip. And the thing about the tendencies is that I think sometimes people get nervous about a label. They think if you define yourself, you can find yourself. And this is not meant to be a box that you get put into that cramps your sense of possibility or a possibility of growth. It's supposed to be a spotlight that can illuminate hidden patterns and show you opportunities for change. And I think when we know the four tendencies, we can show more compassion to ourselves. Because it's not that you lack willpower, it's not that you have no self-control, it's not that you should be able to do something that comes easily to somebody else. Whatever you are, there's a lot of people who are like you. There's a lot of strategies that you can use to fix it. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to change. It's just a question of understanding who you are and maybe finding new tools in order to create a circumstance in which you can thrive. And when you understand other people's tendencies, it allows you to show more compassion for them. And it also makes it easier to set up circumstances so that you can reduce conflict. And just to take a very tiny example from my own life. So I'm an upholder married to a questioner. Sometimes I love it and value it, and sometimes it drives me crazy. So I was filling out a boring bureaucratic form as a true upholder, right? I was like, oh, one of us has to fill this out. Why don't I just go ahead and do it and cross it off the to-do list, you know? Because I know I'll do it right away. Who knows when he'll think it needs to be done. So I'm like filling out the form, and one of the questions is, what is his work address? And I did not know his work address. So I call him up, and I say, what's your work address? Now, does he think I'm going to send him flowers? No. Obviously, the only reason I would be calling is to be filling out a boring bureaucratic form. But I said, what's your work address? And what did he say to me? Why do you want to know? Now, in a previous unenlightened state, I might have said to him, why can't you ever just answer me? Why do you make everything a discussion? What does this mean about our marriage? But now I know he's a questioner. He's not going to do anything unless he's saying, why should I? He has to have the answer. Why should I? He's that way with me. He's that way with everybody in his life. I don't have to take that personally. And now I know what I should have done is to say to him, I'm filling out that boring bureaucratic form. What's your work address? And then he would have told me, because he just needs to have an answer. He needs to have an answer. An obliger needs outer accountability. A rebel needs choice and freedom. It's not that hard, and we can set things up for everyone to be able to thrive when we understand the circumstances that are going to help all of us. So thank you very much, and now I look forward to your questions. Now you get a gold star if you ask the first question because nobody ever wants. Oh, there we go. All right.
So my question actually is twofold. So how do you inspire and motivate an upholder?
Okay. Well.
And if you're married to an upholder, that doesn't sound so good.
Ah.
So what's your?
Oh. See, that's funny. I reveal my bias because I'm like, of course you'd want to be married to an upholder. What is the challenge about being married to an upholder?
You don't need each other. Everybody's getting it done and moving forward, but where's the compliance? Where's the help? Here's my weakness, help me fulfill on this. Like, where do you need each other? That's how it lands for me.
What a fascinating question. Because you're right. And I think that is why upholders do have this air of coldness, because they are very self-sufficient. And they're often maybe not that interested in helping others. Because since they don't need help with things like accountability, they often don't like to provide things like accountability. Partly because they don't like to put expectations on others. That's something that's very striking about upholders, which surprised me. And also, it's a lot of work to provide accountability for somebody. So it's like, well, I'll just take care of me, and you just take care of you, and then everybody's fine. That's very upholder. So you're saying that so for you in a relationship, that's difficult to manage, because it's like there's not that give and take.
Well, I don't know. I just got engaged 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
But in this conversation,
yes.
This is coming up for me.
Yeah. Can I ask your tendency?
I'm an upholder.
And what? Oh, then you'll be fine. Now, if you're both upholders, then I think, but I think that you maybe just want to recognize that it's not going to be a thing where you're going to come home and be like, there might be a lot of self-sufficiency in it. Probably the problem would come if like for the people around you, because there'd be just like a lot of execution happening between the two of you. But I think you're wise to be thinking about the pros and the cons of it, and how it would change the atmosphere of a relationship. Perhaps it would be different from what you might expect, or what might be typical. That's a pretty unusual combination because there aren't that many upholders. It's very rare to see two upholder couples. I did meet a family of 5 upholders, and I'm like, I can't even imagine what that must be like.
Do you ever look at upholders that have rebel children?
Yes, that comes up a lot.
And how do you handle that? Not that I know anything about it.
Yeah, so upholders with rebel children, I would say of all the parents, there's a section in the book where I go through all the different pairings. And again, because people are so different from each other, a lot of things matter. But just looking at the tendencies aspect of it, upholder rebel is tricky. And it's tricky, upholder rebel, either way for a parent-child. Imagine being the upholder child of a rebel parent. That's often very difficult to manage as well. So I want to tell an amazing story about an upholder and a rebel. So again, with the Happier podcast, Elizabeth and I got a question from an upholder mother who said, what do I do about my 5-year-old rebel daughter? How do I make her understand that there's certain things that she just has to do? Like she just has to wash her hands after she uses the potty. And I laughed when I heard that because I said, you know what? You don't have to wash your hands after you use the potty. And your little girl has figured that out. You can't make her do that. You got to figure out a way to make her want to do that for her own reasons because you can't make her. So we talked about this on the podcast, and then this woman, this upholder, wrote me back to tell me what happened, which was like riveted. And I thought this was the most extraordinary example. So she said, I thought about her identity and making her realize that she has to want to do things for her own reason. So I took her to my grandparents' house. So this was the little girl's great-grandparents. It was the mother's grandparents. So these were very elderly people. And she said, they're very elderly, very frail, and my daughter was just running around wild. And I knew that I couldn't say to her, you have to stop running. I couldn't say, you need to calm down, because she's going to say, no, I don't. You can't make me. You're not the boss of me. So what did she say? She went to the identity of the daughter, and she said, Grammy just got out of the hospital. She is so weak. It would be terrible if she fell again. She needs her protectors. Can you be a protector? And the little girl said, I can be her protector. So again, it's like, it's not what you have to do. It's what you choose to do. It's not I'm telling you what you have to, how you have to act. It's like you decide who you want to be. And this is very hard to do. But with things like practicing piano, you love performing. Gosh, it's so much fun to get up on the stage and like have everybody clap and hear what you can do. If you practice enough, maybe you'll get a chance to do it again next year. And it's like, yeah, I'm creative. I like to perform. I'm going to practice because I want to be good enough to get a chance to do it. It's hard. I've heard from a lot of Upholder parents, rebels. But things like, oh, they're going to drop out of school. It's like you have to say to them, okay, if you drop out of school, then what are the consequences of that? And the lesson for all of us from the rebels, and this is something that has like just profoundly changed me as an upholder, is we're more free than we think. We're far more free than we think. There's a lot of things that we think we have to do, we don't have to do. And rebels are a great reminder of that. There's a lot more freedom. If I wanted to wear yoga pants and running shoes right now and every day for the rest of my life, I could do that, and I probably wouldn't even really get in trouble. Next question.
The idea about the overlapping circles.
Yeah.
I'm an obliger, but I think that I'm overlapping with upholder.
Uh-huh.
And you said that was because both of them meet outer expectations.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that because I'm overlapping with upholder, that I might fulfill some inner expectations as well? Or is it just that one sliver of overlap that's always the thing that I do?
Well, the difference between upholders and obligers is how do they meet inner expectations. So if you readily meet inner expectations, then you're an upholder. If you struggle to meet inner expectations, then you're an obliger. So then you're an obliger. But if you find it fairly easy to it's pretty easy for accountability to attach, then you might tip to upholder. One of the things that's very important to note about obligers, and this may be what you're experiencing, is that they're wildly different in what acts as accountability. For some people, like paying for something makes them absolutely likely to do it. Like if they pay for a class, they'll get 100% go. Then I talked to one who was like, well, I realized that if I don't go to my training session, my trainer makes the money anyway, and he gets the free time. So really, it's better if I don't go. And I was like, okay, let me just jump in here and say this is not a good accountability measure for you. For some people, something like an automatic email might act like accountability. For some people, not. For some obligers who tip to upholder, and this was really surprising to me, how often this works. Because I was like, this seems very advanced. I don't think most people could use it, but a lot of obligers can use it, is thinking about the future self. So right now, Diane doesn't want to exercise, but future Diane is going to be really sad that now Diane didn't. So now Diane has to do it for future Diane. I'm amazed by how often obligers can think of the future self as a form of accountability, which is really very just in the imagination, but it can really work. But some obligers, really, they have to actually be getting in trouble with a real person for accountability to attach. So you need to pay a lot of attention to what makes you feel that sense of accountability. So maybe that's where you are, you're an obliger, but it's pretty easy. And so you feel like you're sometimes meeting these inner expectations, probably because there's some aspect of accountability that's come into play. Like a parent in your head, for some people, is like an accountability measure. Many people have talked to me about how, with the death of an important parent, like a parent who played an important role in their life, that they realized that a form of accountability had kind of vanished for them. Because it wasn't even like, they're living in a different state or whatever, but just the idea like, well, what would my mother say? What would my father expect me to do? That was a very powerful thing for them, which then went away. And they maybe didn't understand why their behavior had changed. Well, it was because this very significant but kind of invisible form of accountability had changed.
Oh, I think I have the mic, so I'll go.
Good.
I'm Meredith. I'm so excited for this.
Excellent.
The entire
That's
conversation.
the spirit.
I actually found your book, The Happiness Project, at a thrift store like 5 years ago by accident, and it was like the happiest accident of my life.
Oh, thank you.
So I love your book. I reread it all the time. So I'm super curious about all this. So this question is about my partner.
Okay.
Thank God he's not here.
Okay.
Let's
get into it.
I feel like I'm an upholder. I'm definitely like meet outer expectations, inner expectations, all the expectations I want to meet. So for him though, I feel like he definitely is like super driven to meet outer expectations, but then with inner expectations, he's a complete rebel.
So he's an obliger.
So yeah, so I my question with that is like, in that state of like being so split in how you handle inner and outer
Yes.
expectations, I feel like then it's just hard to know like when it's an inner expectation and when it's an outer expectation, because a lot of expectations kind of overlap.
Yes. No, that's a very good point. It is very tricky sometimes to know if something's an outer or an inner expectation. But here's something very important for you to think about in your relationship.
Yeah.
Is that typically for an obliger, the spouse is inner, which is really like a very romantic thing if you think about it. You're so close to me that if you tell me to do something, I'm going to ignore you, just like I'd ignore myself. So spouses and even families often typically do not make good accountability partners. So for some people, it does work. Like I've heard from people where it's like, every day I come home and my husband says, hey, did you go to the gym today? And that really helps me keep me on track. But for a lot of people, it's like, I don't care what you say. You know what I mean? So if you see that he needs outer accountability in order to meet inner expectations, you might not be the best person to provide that. You might want to find other structures for it. And you like, oh, well, it's you, and it's always good to look at the past. Was there a time when a person succeeded? Like, oh, you loved playing basketball in college. Like, maybe you could join a basketball team now, and like a bunch of guys could get together a couple times a week and play basketball, and that would be a great form of exercise for you. Or, oh, it's so fun to go riding bikes with your brother. Why don't you just like have a standing date on Saturday to go riding bikes or something like that? Because it really does need that inner accountability. Now, the fact is, sometimes Obligor Rebellion will kick in with an inner expectation. This is very, very challenging. It often happens in the area of health. So I'm an obliger. I'm going into deep Obligor Rebellion. I have this sense of resentment and burnout, but I don't take it out on the world. I take it out on myself. I refuse to exercise. I refuse to take my blood pressure medication. I refuse to do my rehab exercises. I refuse to eat healthfully because it's a form of Obligor Rebellion. This happens. It's very tricky. I have to say, like, I haven't heard anybody really explain how to get out of that other than to just sort of cycle through a bunch of accountability measures and see if something will finally kick. Because usually there is some part of the obliger that wants to do it, and they're just caught in this Obligor Rebellion, which usually does sort of burn itself out. But so if you're feeling frustrated, if you're an upholder and you're married to an obliger, you're probably going to feel a lot of frustration when you see them failing to meet their inner expectations.
Yeah, like if you can you're meeting everyone's expectations
Yes.
and succeeding, but I know on the inside you feel like you're not succeeding, you feel unhappy, but
Yeah.
you can't get out of that cycle of like stopping meeting outer so that
Yeah.
you can meet inner.
Okay, so, very important point. Okay, you just made a shift there that's very important to recognize. Often obligers and the people around obligers perceive what is happening as a matter of priority. I'm putting others first, I'm putting myself last, that's why I'm not meeting my expectations. That's a misconception. It's not a matter of priority. It's a matter of outer expectations and inner expectations, and this is really important because sometimes obligers think that if only I could get rid of outer expectations, then inner expectations could be met because I'm putting those people first. Therefore, if they went away, if I quit my demanding job, then I would have time to do, I would be able to do everything that's important to me because all those things would go away. That doesn't happen. There must be systems of outer accountability. And I've heard, interestingly, I've heard from several people with a specific scenario of taking retirement, One person even said that they retired early and took a real financial hit because they thought, okay, if I retire, then finally I will do all those things on my bucket list. No. She said, I have done nothing. Because what you need is outer accountability. Let's say you have a demanding job and a side hustle that you've always really been wanting to do, and then you're like, you know what? Obligor Rebellion, I'm done with this demanding job. I'm quitting. I'm going to do my side hustle. And then you just stall out. Nothing happens. So that happens, outer accountability. Get a client, a customer, a student. Join an accountability group. I have this app, the Better app, where you can join and talk about the Four Tendencies or have an accountability group there if you want. Or join an accountability group or work with a coach. There's all kinds of health coaches and exercise coaches and executive coaches and business coaches and entrepreneurship coaches. Anybody to give you that accountability. But one thing that, upholders are like, well, if you say it's important to you, just do it. You keep saying that you want to do it, so I don't understand why you aren't. There's a sense of frustration there. That's where the compassion can come in. Because things come easily for upholders that don't come easily for some of the other tendencies.
Hi.
Okay, one more, and who's got the mic?
Hi, Gretchen.
Oh, great.
I really appreciate what you had to say today and the toolkit that you've offered us. I was just curious, in your research, have you noticed that one tendency seems to be a happier, fulfilled person in life?
Interesting. That's a great final question, so thank you. So this is a question that is an obvious big question, which is there a tendency that's happier, that's healthier, that's more productive or more creative? And here's what I think in my observation. It's not a matter of tendency. It's a matter of figuring out how to work with your tendency. So when you look at the people that are the happiest, the healthiest, the most productive, the most creative, they're the ones who have figured out how to harness the strengths of their tendency, but also to kind of hack themselves or figure out ways to deal with the limitations and weaknesses of their tendency so that they can get where they want. So if you're an obliger, if you build in all the outer accountability that you need, then you can get anywhere you want. If you're a questioner who's figured out how to get yourself to a workplace where your questioner perspective is very valued, and you've learned to talk to your boss in a way that makes you seem constructive, then you figured out, oh, I love data and information and monitoring. I'll wear, a Fitbit, and that's going to make me exercise because I'll know every day. They figured it out. Or a rebel who's really been able to tap into what do I want, what do I choose, this is what works for me, so that their rebel tendency doesn't hobble them, but actually is an engine for whatever life they want. Or upholders who realize where they need to ameliorate some of the kind of extremes of the tendency. So I don't think it's that any one particular tendency. I think it's just within the tendencies are people figuring out how to work with that tendency, really to gain from it, and to figure out how to offset anything that might be a negative. So again, thank you very much for having me here today. It was so much fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gretchen.